Well, hey everyone, and welcome to Generation Zion. We've made the case that beyond a reasonable doubt, Christianity is true, and you can find all of that on our YouTube channel at Generation Zion. Now, more recently, we've been discussing cultural issues, and one such issue that arises is the issue of abortion. And that's what our guest speaker is going to talk about today. With us is Seth Gruber, who's been speaking publicly on behalf of the unborn since the age of 19. He travels across the US, educating and equipping pro-life advocates. He speaks in Protestant and Catholic high schools, churches, and pro-life training seminars. He engages in academic debate, blogs, and is even a cultural and political commentator. He also has his own podcast, Unaborted, so definitely go check that out when we're finished here. He's been featured by a variety of sources, including World Magazine, American Family Association, Christian Research Institute, Christianity Today, and so on. In short, I don't know that there's anyone better to hear from on the case against abortion than Seth Gruber, who is reaching all generations and is helping to change the way that our country thinks about and interacts with abortion. So having said that, I will pass it on to you, Seth Gruber. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate all that you guys are doing in a moment where the church needs to provide moral, spiritual, and all add political clarity to very confused people and to a very confused country, and often to a very confused church on issues that demand a Christian worldview response. And so, no issue is really more emotionally pressing, excuse me, and significant than abortion, because abortion, like slavery, is a litmus test of our republic. And this is why I believe that of all the wonderful speakers you've had on, including some of my friends like Tim Barnett, Sean McDowell is a great friend. I do most of the pro-life apologetic sessions for the Stand to Reason apologetic youth conferences. I love Christian apologetics. But if you don't get the right to life right, you won't get any other rights right. And that's why we understand that while many issues are important, they don't all carry the same moral weight. It's not like sex trafficking wasn't happening in 1850s America. It's not like spousal abuse wasn't happening in 1850s America. There are lots of horrific moral outrages in different segments of American history and in different countries where they abused human rights. But when we think of 1850s America, we all think of slavery. We all think of the run up to the 1860 election where Abraham Lincoln beat Stephen Douglas to become the abolitionist president, because slavery, like abortion today, denied or denies the founding principles of the republic. And the founding principles of our republic, what made us so unique, was that we acknowledged what should be self-evident truths, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are the right to life. Oh, look, they put life first. I wonder why. Because if you don't get the right to life right, you won't get any other rights right. In fact, you'll get them grievously wrong. So liberty, pursuit of happiness, property, wonderful things, they don't mean much. In fact, they mean nothing at all if you can be murdered. And so Ronald Reagan, the former governor of the once great state of California, my home state where I was born and raised, was previously pro-choice. Ronald Reagan was not pro-life when he began his political career. And he had a pro-life conversion, became a Christian. And in his book, Abortion and the Conscience of a Nation, which is aptly titled, he understood that abortion represented who we really were, what we really believed as American citizens. He said, connecting the two outrages of slavery and abortion, he said, Abraham Lincoln understood that we could not survive as a free nation as long as some men could decide that other men are not fit to be free and should therefore be slaves. Likewise, Reagan says, today we cannot survive as a free land when some men get to decide that others are not fit to live and should therefore be abandoned to abortion and infanticide. Therefore, there is no cause more important than affirming the transcendent right to life of all human beings, the right without which no other rights have any meaning. In other words, if our country is going to deny the natural right to life to 63 million human beings since 1973, we cannot trust that government to protect any other rights that flow from that first and most important of all rights. And you watch this play out in real time in 2020, by the way, guys. Democratic governors and mayors, primarily, all on one side of the political aisle, refusing to protect American citizens' property rights against the literal domestic terrorism, burning down of businesses, lighting cities on fire. Where were these American citizens' property rights? And why didn't we prosecute all of the rioters who burned down private citizens, individual properties where they made a living to support their family? What happened? Oh, look, they didn't protect our natural right to property. The same Democrats as governors and mayors refusing to protect our natural right to liberty. Remember, in my home state of California, Governor Newsom or Mussolini literally tried to ban singing. He said, no singing in churches. But if you're singing the hymns of the religion of secular progressivism in the streets of LA as you scream, America sucks, then he'll say that systemic racism is a public health crisis and he'll thank you for burning down half of LA. Well, where was our natural right to liberty, to gather together, to lay on of hands, to pray for the sick, to obey Hebrews, which says, don't forsake meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing? My point is, guys, is that we should not be surprised that our politicians refuse to protect our natural right to liberty and property when almost 49 years ago, they spat on, despised, and ignored and refused to protect the natural right to life of human beings. And since the Roe versus Wade decision, over 63 million image bearers of God, little human beings, our little neighbors, have been killed. And it's been defended under the mantle of reproductive health care and reproductive justice. So that's why this issue is so important. I love many issues. And if you're called to another issue, praise God. I want you to follow God's calling on your life. I don't think it's everyone's role to fight abortion full time. I don't. I do believe this, though. Everyone has a role to play. When little human beings can be slaughtered, it's legalized, and our freaking tax dollars fund it. Yes, we all have some responsibility to adopt in our individual personal lives to end the genocide of babies in a location that our Savior became human in, a womb. So, yes, I think God cares about life in the womb, seeing as he stepped down into human history in one, in a womb that he knit together. So, there you go, incarnation, mind blown. But as you guys know, when you engage on this issue, the other side loves to change the subject. And the reason is because they actually can't contend on the main thing. And you guys have probably recognized this. Taking pro-lifers down rabbit trails or trying to change the subject. Oh, but you're a guy, you have a penis, so you have to shut up. No uterus, no choice. You're not a woman. How many babies have you adopted? How many babies have you fostered? Do you give away half your salary to take care of mothers after they've given birth to that baby? If she doesn't get the abortion, she's going to die, or her husband, who's threatening to kill her, is going to murder them both. I guess you're not really pro-life. I could go on and on and on. Endless distractions to the case for life. And why? Because our ideological opponents, you guys, actually can't contend on the main thing. They can't contend with us because we have a scientifically sound case that human beings begin at the moment of conception. We have a philosophically sound case that all humans are persons, and any argument you use to deny personhood to unborn humans could be used to deny personhood to born humans. And then for our woke brothers and sisters in the church who say, you remember the group Pro-Life Evangelicals for Biden leading up to the election, that say, yeah, I'm super pro-life. That's why I vote for the most pro-abortion president in American history. For our very confused woke brothers and sisters, we also have to bring theological clarity by making the biblical case. And so how many of you have ever been in an argument, I guess? It could have been your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, or maybe a sibling or a friend. And you knew you were winning the argument. And they knew you were winning the argument. And they changed the subject. Or vice versa. How many of you have been in an argument and the other person was winning the argument and they knew it and you knew it and you changed the subject? This is exactly what pro-abortion advocates do on the issue of abortion. So we live in a culture today, I'd say more so than any other time, that loves to take the main thing and make it not the main thing. So they hurl insults and accusations and lies and objections that change the subject because they can't engage in any meaningful way on our case for the humanity, personhood, dignity, and right to life of preborn children. So we need to become what my boss and mentor, Scott Klusendorf, calls essential pro-lifers, making the essential pro-life case and keeping the main thing, and throwing the main thing very kindly back into our ideological opponents' faces and not allowing them to distract us. And so the Bible's very clear about what the main thing is, right? It's very clear. Bible says that human beings are created in the imago Dei, right? The image of God. So the divine spark in the soul of God resides in you, brothers and sisters. You bear his image and his likeness, and that's why we're more infinitely valuable than any other form of life. And so because human beings bear the image of the prenatal deity who stepped into time and space as a fetus, human beings have what's called intrinsic dignity or intrinsic value. And intrinsic simply means that it's part of who you are. It's in virtue of being human to have dignity. That's what intrinsic means. It means that I actually can't take your dignity or your right to life from you. I can't separate it from the person. It's intrinsic to who they are at their very core because they're created in the image of God. So this is actually very significant when we understand the main case about human dignity in the Bible, because we're not valuable because of what we can do, right? Of our functions. We're not valuable because of our utility that we provide to others. And this has been the argument of nearly every communist regime ever, right? As long as you provide value or utility to the state, to the political elite class, then you'll be allowed to live and you'll survive and have your rights protected. But if you're not, right, if you're what the Nazis called an Untermensch, a subhuman, or they also called Jews useless eaters. And of course, the Nazis went first after the mentally retarded, the physically malformed, and then eventually Jews. If you can't provide significant value to the power class, then you'll just be killed. So this is actually very significant. And as you know, the Christian view of the human person being made in the image of God changed the course of human history. I mean, this is what ended up ending infanticide in Rome because Christians were adopting or rescuing babies abandoned to die on the side of the road. And it was such an offense to Romans that the Christians were better people and better at raising children than they were. And so the Christian view of the human person has changed human history, and it needs to do so again, because abortion is the greatest human rights violation in human history. And so because we're valuable simply because we're human and not because of how we can function or how we perform, then the Bible strictly forbids the shedding of innocent blood. You know, scripture takes that very seriously. Proverbs says that God actually hates hands that shed innocent blood. God forbids the shedding of innocent blood. Jesus, rather, in Matthew 5, and then God does it as well as in Exodus 23. And so from those two premises, that human beings are intrinsically valuable and that God strictly forbids the shedding of innocent blood, there's only one question we have to answer to determine what the main thing is on this issue. Are the unborn human? If they're human and human beings bear the image of God and have intrinsic dignity, then the unborn child is also an image bearer of God if they're human beings. But instead of answering that one question, are the unborn human, the culture of death and the partisans of abortion just immediately change the subject. And so let's briefly review what the essential pro-life case is, so you guys kind of understand how to make it as concisely, persuasively as possible. And if you memorize this and if you commit this into sort of your ideological arrows in your quiver, then you'll be able to remain grounded on the main thing. And you'll recognize the distraction arguments that the pro-abort tries to use, and you'll be able to call those out and return the debate back to the main thing. So, excuse me, if you're able to keep the main thing, you'll be far better equipped to defend our preborn neighbors, or to be what I call an ambassador for the preborn. So 3 words for you to remember what the essential pro-life case is: syllogism. Syllogism. And you guys know what a syllogism is, probably. It's just where you lay out your premises in a very linear form. And if each of the premises are true, valid, and correct, the conclusion naturally follows. And so here is the basic syllogism for the pro-life argument. Premise 1 says, it's always wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings without proper justification. And I add that without proper justification because sometimes pro-aborts will try to say, I'll try to talk about a war example or for something, some war overseas, and say, well, sometimes you kill innocent human beings in war, right? And so I guess sometimes it can be justified, right? Our case is not that that you should never kill innocent human beings. You should never intentionally kill innocent human beings without proper justification. Now, I'm not going to jump into just war theory with you guys. That's not the purpose of this. But you know what I mean is, right? Sometimes we do have to make tragic decisions in war. That's different than killing the preborn child, which is never necessary. One might argue in a just war theory that maybe sometimes innocent human beings are killed in order to get rid of the enemy or something. So that we're saying without proper justification, meaning there is never a justification to kill a baby in an abortion. Okay. Premise 2 is, abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being without proper justification. Conclusion, therefore, abortion is always wrong. So again, premise 1, it's always wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings without proper justification. Premise 2, abortion does that, intentionally kills an innocent human being without proper justification. Therefore, abortion is wrong. So when you lay out your argument this way, you'll be able to take your friends or pro-choice Uncle Bob at the Super Bowl through each of the premises and ask him where you went wrong. And that really helps establish clarity of thought. So on premise one, right? Hey, Uncle Bob, can you agree? Can we agree that it's always wrong to intentionally kill innocent people for no reason at all, just for the hell of it? He's gonna go, yeah, of course. Of course, I'm gonna agree with you on that. So you can get probably every pro-choicer you guys, to agree with premise one. Obviously, it's premise two where the abortion debate happens, because we're saying abortion intentionally kills an innocent person, human being, for no reason. There's no justification for it. So there's three questions we have to answer and provide clarity on to defend premise two. And these three questions are the three issues that the pro-abort's going to attack you on. Why? To discredit premise two. So those questions are: is the unborn a human being? Because I said abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Premise two is: does abortion intentionally kill? Right? Does abortion intentionally kill? And thirdly, is abortion ever justified? Those would be the three questions we'd have to answer to defend our syllogism, primarily in premise two. So let's start with that first question: is the unborn a human being? Well, not because I say so, but because the people who kill babies say so, because the science of embryology says so. I mean, Peter Singer, for goodness sake, who defends killing babies through 1 year old. He's a quote unquote philosopher, I guess. I guess he still meets that criteria, sicko, at Princeton University. Literally defends infanticide. And he applies his same criteria for denying personhood to the preborn to the infant as well. He says, you're right, pro-lifer. When we critique him, he says, you're right. The same criteria I've used to establish personhood doesn't only disclude the preborn, it also discludes the infant. So he defends killing babies up to 1 year old. And yet he says, he's admitted multiple times, yeah, obviously the unborn's a human being. I mean, we know that. So, I mean, the people who kill babies admit this. The science of embryology is clear on this. And the science of embryology can be, I guess, summarized like this. From the moment of conception, you were a distinct, living, and whole human being. And it's very important to use each of those three terms, because that's actually the language that embryology textbooks use to be clear on who is there at the moment of conception. Well, that child is distinct. The child's distinct because the body in her body is actually not her body, right? We kind of know this at a self-evident level, don't we? Because if the body in her body is part of her body, right? The mantra, my body, my choice. So if there's just one body involved, the mother's, I guess we'd be forced to admit that pregnant women have 20 fingers and 20 toes, 2 brains, 2 hearts, 2 different DNA codes existing simultaneously, potentially 2 different blood types existing simultaneously. That's a doozy for science. Oh, and what happens if she's pregnant with a boy? Well, I guess pregnant women now have penises. Now, of course, the UC Berkeley professor says, yes, amen, you're enrolled at UC Berkeley. Welcome to the lesbian dance theory major. No. Men cannot become women and women cannot become men. As much as the left would like to tell us that over and over and over again. Pregnant women are women, which means they don't have male genitalia. And so abortion obviously kills a distinct human being because the mother's not dead after the abortion. And the abortion has to rearrange the body parts of the distinct, unique individual child on the hospital table to ensure that none of the baby limbs are left floating around in mom's uterus. So you're distinct from the moment of conception. You're also living, because dead things don't grow. Shocker. And the unborn child meets all of the requirements for a living thing that we learned in like 7th grade biology, guys. So the unborn child is living. Lastly, the child is actually directing their own internal growth from within. And you probably know this. So pregnant women don't ask their unborn babies to grow, do they? They don't will the fetus to develop. The unborn child is actually developing themselves from within, whether mom wants them to develop or not. They're directing their own internal growth. So they're living. And lastly, you from the moment of conception were a whole human being. What does it mean to be a whole human being? Don't confuse wholeness, okay, with development. Don't confuse wholeness with having realized certain functions or cognitive abilities that come along with a level of development. Okay. So being a whole human being doesn't mean, oh, now I'm currently possessed of certain cognitive abilities that I didn't have when I was smaller. No, no, no. That's not what it means to be a whole human being. Wholeness simply means that you already had everything you needed at the moment of conception to what? To realize your full growth and development as a participating member of the human species. So we all find ourselves on a different tick mark on the continuum of human development. But when did the continuum of human development begin? When we became humans, right? And when did we become humans? The moment of conception, right? So we're all more or less developed than other human beings. The preborn child just happens to be the least developed of all human beings, but they're still a human being, right? The 9-month-old baby is significantly more developed than the fetus, right? But a teenager is even more developed than the toddler. So these we differ in degree of our development and cognitive abilities, but not in our degree of humanness. We had that from the moment of conception. So to kind of drive this point home, so because the pro board doesn't understand this, they're going to attack you on this point a lot. Okay, they're going to say you probably heard things like this, right? Are you kidding me? You think a 4-week zygote is the moral equivalent of a 5-year-old? They find that so stupid and weird because they are science deniers, essentially, right? I mean, this is an anti-scientific position to say the baby in the womb, and sometimes they'll use the word baby, right? It's like, oops, you acknowledge reality. Yeah, the baby in the womb, they're like kind of becoming human, right? They're becoming human, and then they're like fully human at birth. This is anti-scientific bigotry. There's no such thing as becoming human. Okay, you either a human or you're not. It's not like a degree of difference. There's a degree of difference in development, but not in a degree of difference in humanness. Okay, so think of a Polaroid photo. When you take a picture, you know the photo gets spit out. You guys remember this? Or are you too young? I guess they're kind of cool again, huh? You start shaking the photo so it develops and you see it start appearing before your eyes. Okay, imagine you got a picture of like some rare animal, and I ripped the photo out of your hands. I ripped it up into little pieces and I threw it in the pool. Now you'd probably be pissed at me, right? Because you're like, man, I got this amazing picture. But what if I said, dude, chill out, man? That wasn't a picture of an animal. That was just a black smudgy on a white piece of paper. Now you'd probably respond by saying, Seth, you anti-developmental scientific bigot, the animal was already there. We just couldn't see him yet. Everything that was necessary for that photo to realize its full development was already present when the photo got spit out. It just needed time. Similarly, from the moment of conception, you were a whole human being who already had everything you needed to realize your full growth and development as a participating member of the human species, even if we couldn't see you yet. You just needed time. Okay, so that's what it means to be a whole human being. So be very clear on that. I didn't cherry pick terms to make the pro-life position sound more friendly. Those are the terms you'll find in embryology textbooks: distinct, living, and whole. Okay. So is the unborn a human being? Yes, but not because I say so, but because the science of embryology says so. I'll read you just one quote from a professor of genetics at University of Descartes. His name is Dr. Jeremy Le Guin. He put it quite concisely. He said, after fertilization, that's a synonym for conception, after fertilization has taken place, a new human being has come into being. And then he goes on to say, it is no longer a matter of taste or opinion, right? Meaning, if you say I'm wrong, you're stupid. And like, it's not like something we can agree to disagree on. He says, it's no longer a matter of taste or opinion. It is plain experimental evidence. Each individual, not potential person, guys, each individual has a very neat beginning at conception. Okay. So that's just one of many geneticists or embryologists that I could cite to you. So remember, we're defending premise 2, right? Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being without proper justification. First question, is the unborn a human being? Yes. Second question, does abortion intentionally kill? Remember, I used very specific language. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Okay, is it intentional? Well, yes, because it's not accidental, right? It's not like a miscarriage. A miscarriage, by its very definition, is accidental. That's what makes it a miscarriage. That's what that word means. If you are punching your uterus or your stomach when you're pregnant and you miscarry, that's not a miscarriage, that's an abortion, right? Because you induced it, right? If you're drinking tons of alcohol or smoking drugs and you have a miscarriage, it's not a miscarriage, it's an abortion. So abortion is intentional because it's not accidental. It's not like women just find themselves on an abortion table and they're like, well, how did I get here? Now, there are horrific stories. There always are, of some degenerate boyfriend or pimp drugging young women and dragging them into abortion clinics, but they're very rare. Most women, they show up at the abortion clinic because they want to be there. Now, lots of women say they felt pressured, right, by others to get the abortion, but very few women say, like, my boyfriend took me in the car to the abortion clinic with a gun at me and said, you're going to get this abortion. So that almost never happens. So it's not accidental, and it is intentional because she chose to be there, right? She paid a physician to kill her unborn child. So it is intentional. But again, not because I say so, but because the people who kill babies say that abortion is obviously an intentional act of violence and assault on the preborn child who is killed in the process. So, Dr. Warren Hearn wrote the leading textbook teaching medical students how to kill babies. Dr. Warren Hearn, it's called Abortion Practice, right? What an apt name. Could you get any more clear? Practicing abortions. It's called Abortion Practice. And Dr. Warren Hearn killed thousands and thousands of children, okay? Maybe tens of thousands, and wrote the leading textbook on how he did it, okay? And here's what he says in his book. He says, we have reached a point in this particular technology where there is no possibility of denial, meaning you can't deny it. There's no possibility of denial of an act of destruction by the operator. The operator is the abortionist. He says, it is before one's eyes. The sensations of dismemberment flow through the forceps like an electric current. I mean, this is sick stuff. This is deeply disturbing language. This is the guy training students how to kill babies. Obviously, that's intentional language. Furthermore, Camille Paglia, who's a pro-choice professor, academic, and writer, and a professor at the University of Arts in Philadelphia, is one of the more honest pro-choicers, right? She kind of says the quiet part out loud. And pro-lifers appreciate that because we're like, well, thank you for being honest. She says the parts that other pro-choicers don't say. They're like, Camille, shut up, don't say what we actually believe. And she just says it. So she wrote a 2008 salon.com article. Here's what she said. This is damning language. This is going to blow you guys away. She says, hence, I have always frankly admitted that abortion is murder. The extermination of the powerless by the powerful. That's like a phenomenal definition of genocide, by the way. The extermination of the powerless by the powerful. She says liberals, for the most part, and she's including herself, have shrunk from facing the ethical consequences of their embrace of abortion, which results in the annihilation of concrete individuals and not just clumps of insensate tissue. I mean, and this woman's still pro-choice, guys. Camille Paglia has not become pro-life. And she says abortion's murder. It's powerful people killing weak people. And it kills concrete individuals and not just clumps of tissue. Gnarly. So she's saying this is obviously intentional. Okay. So is abortion intentional? Yes, but not because I say so, but because the people who kill babies and defend it says it's intentional. Okay. Third question. Is abortion ever justified? Okay, here's where the rubber meets the road, right? This becomes the primary argument of the pro-abortion advocate. What's their number one argument? That even if the child is human, it doesn't matter because the mother's rights always trump the child's rights. In other words, abortion is morally justified. Even if it kills a baby, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's their argument. It's that they make a moral justification for abortion. So we're defending premise 2 that abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being without proper justification. As soon as you add that without proper justification part, your pro-abortion friend's going to go, nope, can't hang with you because I think abortion's always justified. Okay, so how can we argue that abortion's never justified? I'm going to argue it's never justified in 2 ways, and I think this is very important. You guys need to grasp this. It's not justified medically, and it's not justified morally, okay? Now, you've probably heard the arguments from sometimes pro-lifers, right? Who say, but if the mother's life is on the line, then abortion is justified. So they're making, I guess, yeah, a moral justification, but also a medical one, right? They're saying it's medically necessary to save mom's life. I say no. I say no. And maybe that surprises you, because many pro-lifers actually believe that sometimes abortion is necessary to save mom's life. You ready for a doozy? Abortion is never medically necessary to save mom's life, even in high-risk, life-threatening pregnancies. Okay, if you're wondering what I mean by that, let's unpack it. Abortion is never medically justified. You can go to the Dublin Declaration. I don't know if it's .com or .org, but if you just Google it, Dublin, like Ireland, Dublin, Dublin Declaration, you'll find a petition signed by over 1,000 OBGYNs, nurses, midwives, doctors, medical professionals, and neonatologists, all agreeing to this statement: abortion is never medically necessary to save mom's life. How is that true? How could that be the case? Okay. If the pregnancy is causing a risk to mom's life, right? And you need to make her not pregnant to save her life, here's the question: is abortion the only way to end pregnancy? No. The other way to end pregnancy is through a cesarean section, by a C-section, or inducing early labor with Pitocin. In other words, delivering the child, not killing the child. Now, but maybe you're thinking, yeah, but Seth, what if the baby is not developed enough to survive outside the womb? Then delivering them early just kills them, Seth. So you're not being consistent, Seth, because that would kill them just like the abortion would kill them. Is that the same thing, though? Is that the same thing? I would contend, as a pro-lifer and a Christian, that that's not the same thing at all. Killing a baby intentionally and actively through abortion is always wrong. If mom's life is threatened and you have to deliver the child early, to what? To kill the child? No, why are we delivering the child early? To save mom's life. So the death of the child in that circumstance is a foreseen but unintended consequence. That's the language. You kill the baby. When you perform an abortion, what's your intention? To kill the baby. When you deliver baby early because you have to, what's your intention? To save mom's life, right? And in that life-threatening circumstance for the mother, by the way, they're very rare, but in a life-threatening pregnancy, if you do nothing, how many people will you probably lose? Probably two, unless the child's developed enough to survive outside the womb. Now, what about ectopic pregnancies, right? This is the big one people bring up. This is when the baby implants in the fallopian tube. You might have heard the term tubal pregnancy or ectopic pregnancy. So all of us here, okay, we were conceived, right? And then within 24 hours to a week or so, we traveled down one of our mother's two fallopian tubes. I'm sorry, someone here could have been conceived through IVF. So artificially in a petri dish, but probably I'm safe to assume that we were conceived in our mother. Then we traveled down one of our mother's two fallopian tubes, and then we implanted in the uterine wall. So life doesn't begin in implantation; it begins at conception. After implanting in the uterus, that's where we develop for the rest of our prenatal life, right? Well, when a baby implants in the fallopian tube, okay, baby starts to develop. That's what happens after implantation. So what happens to the fallopian tube? It starts to expand and stretch. So if you don't do anything, what happens? Mom's fallopian tube bursts. When that happens, baby dies immediately. And did you know, if you don't have mom like down the street from a hospital, an emergency room, she's going to die right away too. She's going to bleed out internally. So in an ectopic pregnancy, if you don't do anything, how many lives do you lose? You lose two. So what you do is you remove the baby from the fallopian tube. Why? To kill the baby? No, to save mom's life. It's the same thing as in a high-risk pregnancy later in term. You're delivering the baby to save mom's life. Okay. Now, thanks to medical advancements, you guys, this is phenomenal, by the way. For you women tuning in, guess what? Great news for you. You have less fear of losing your life due to pregnancy in America in 2021 than any other woman in all of freaking human history. Okay. Because we can diagnose ectopic pregnancies early and then remove the child if necessary. Previously, before that, women almost always died from an ectopic pregnancy bursting. So awesome. Congratulations, ladies. Great time to be alive. Praise God for America, the systemically racist, bigoted BS country, right? No, it's wonderful. You should be very glad to live here. So because of medical advancements, guess what? Even if your life is endangered when the baby is, let's say, 24 weeks along, right? At 24 weeks now, we can save children at 24 weeks with like almost 100% success rate. By 26 weeks, that baby's chilling. But even at 24 weeks, by the way, you want to know the earliest baby to have ever been born and survived? 21 weeks and 0 days. If you know your biology, you'll know that full gestation is 40 weeks. So we've almost cut it in half. That baby was born at the end of 2019 and went home during the summer of the scamdemic or the COVID shutdowns. Phenomenal. This child born at 21 weeks and 0 days. So even if mom's life is like on the line, guess what we can usually do? We can put her on bed rest and love them both, care for the child and the mother, and just get that baby old enough, right? Just get it developed enough in the womb to where they can be safely delivered early. And then you save mom and baby's life. So you never have to kill the baby through abortion to save mom's life. It's one of the biggest pro-choice myths that you'll hear. And why do they use that? To distract you from the main thing, to try to get you to grant their premise that some abortions are justified, but they're not. Okay, so medically, no, medically it's not justified. But I'm also going to argue that abortion is never justified morally, that there's no moral case for abortion. And again, this is the pro-choicers' favorite battlefield, is to say it doesn't matter if it's human. The mother has a moral right to abortion, right? That's their argument. Okay, so how do pro-choicers attempt to argue that abortion is morally justified? Well, they resort to the tried and true strategy of the Democratic Party circa 1850, which is to say that not all humans are persons. Not all humans are persons. And those that we deny personhood to, we can just murder and use euphemisms to describe their mistreatment. So slavery is not slavery, guys. It's just plantation care. It's just economic rights. Abortion's not baby killing, guys. It's just reproductive health care, don't you know? It's just feminism. It's just women's rights. This is what genocidal freaks always do, don't they? They use euphemisms. So the Holocaust became, oh, it's just ethnic cleansing. Because you have to use euphemisms to suppress the heinous reality that you're defending. Why? Because truth tends to be self-evident. Truth tends to be self-evident. We can recognize that all humans are persons. And so they make their moral argument for abortion by saying that only persons have rights, right? Now, maybe you're thinking, wait, a human and a person, aren't those like the same thing? And we as Christians, we probably would never separate those terms, right? Human and person, person and human. We probably use those synonymously, interchangeably. Well, the practitioners of genocide historically, guys, have always separated the term human from person and said that not all humans are persons. And they have to do this because the class of victims that they want to discriminate and abuse already, you can't justify that mistreatment if you acknowledge that they're persons, right? So then what they do is they come up with criteria for personhood, right? Here's the litmus test for personhood. So in 1850, it was white skin color, smarter. Now these were stupid, bigoted like arguments. Obviously, there's nothing about skin color or IQ that makes you more valuable than another individual, right? But wake up, guys. Racists knew that. Do you think racists actually thought that it was melanin that granted rights? No, of course not, because that would mean that the albino would reign over all of the other normal white-skinned plantation owners. They didn't actually believe that pale-skinned people had more rights and dark-skinned people didn't, because then they would be bowing down and giving their plantation to every albino within a 50-mile radius. They don't actually believe that. It's not like they were taking IQ tests to see, well, if some blacks have a higher IQ than whites, then we have to let black people whip white people. No, but those were their arguments for slavery, right? They said that whites were smarter than blacks, and they were white. I mean, right? Can't you see that, guys? Guess what? They didn't actually believe that that criteria for personhood had anything to do with human dignity. What they did was they just pulled out personhood criteria out of their butts. They just invented criteria for personhood out of thin air. Why? Because they already wanted to mistreat the class of human beings that they had to justify mistreating. So they looked at blacks who they already hated, and they said, oh, well, they're dark skinned and they seem stupider, so that's my criteria for personhood. They didn't actually believe it. So this is what you need to understand, that your pro-choice friends, they don't actually believe that personhood and a right to life are based on, now ready, here are the arguments for abortion: cognitive abilities, self-awareness, viability, ability to feel pain. These are all the arguments you hear to justify abortion, right? Do they actually believe that? No, no. They're identifying the fact that the preborn lacks those functions. And so it becomes very convenient to use their lack of functions to argue that you don't have rights if you lack those functions. Just like they said, if you're not white and you're not as smart as us, you don't have rights. So this is what you need to be aware of. It's the same flipping worldview. It's the same worldview. Not all humans are persons. Oh, really? Then who are persons? Oh, well, the elite class gets to decide. And we get to decide what checkbox criteria you have to meet in order to be a person. Conveniently, the criteria for personhood that the elite class comes up with never denies the elite class rights to personhood. Isn't that so strange? No, because they come up with the personhood criteria. Okay, so you need to be aware of this. So, okay, all of that slightly comedic but historically accurate description to say this. Here are the new criteria for personhood. Ready? Here's the new woke criteria for personhood. And of course, the preborn doesn't meet the litmus test for personhood. Shocker. Okay, so they argue that only persons have rights and the unborn are not persons. They're not persons because they're different than us. Right, but we differ from one another too. I mean, like, we all look different. Yeah. But no, that I know, you silly pro-lifer. But no, listen, the preborn is very different than us because they're smaller, they're less developed. And so because they're less developed, they haven't realized the cognitive abilities that I have. They're in a womb. They're in a womb. And so her body, her choice. And they're more dependent. They can't survive apart from the mother. So they're not a person. Don't you get that? So these are the four differences. SLED. Think of the acronym SLED. SLED, right? Size, level of development, environment or location, and dependency. So that's it. They come up with the criteria for personhood. The preborn doesn't meet them, therefore they're not persons. So yeah, the preborn is smaller than born people, right? But I'm 6'3" and I'm 200 pounds. So if you guys are under 6'3", I'm sorry, you're not persons. And if I kill you, it's actually just reproductive health care. Now, for those of you under 6'3", I know that's heartbreaking news, but see, you're just not woke. So you just don't get it. You don't get that size is actually decisive for value. No, this is stupid. Of course this is stupid, because men are generally larger than women, but that doesn't mean that men are generally more valuable than women. Our size has no bearing on our rights, right? Duh. So it doesn't matter that the preborn child is smaller. By the way, some babies at 9 months in the womb are larger than newborn infants, right? So if they really want to go with size, then I guess we'd have to argue that babies 10 days past their due date that weigh like 10 pounds in the uterus are persons, while the preemie born at 30 weeks and weighing 5 pounds is not a person, right? Because size, right? Size is no, ridiculous, right? Level of development. Yeah, the baby's less developed. Here's the big one, right? They say because the baby's less developed, they haven't realized certain functions and cognitive abilities that we have, because they're not developed enough to have realized those functions. And what are some of those functions? Well, I told you earlier, right? Ability to feel pain. A baby can't feel pain. Well, actually, did you know the newest science from neonatology, the science of fetal pain, suggests that the baby in the womb, you guys, responds to stimuli of some kind as early as 7 weeks, 7 and 8 weeks. The vast majority of abortions are performed between 6 and 8 weeks. So the child feels something. But by 18 weeks, it's entirely undisputed that the child can feel the full range of human pain. So when you dismember them, it is as painful to them as if I dismembered you. But let's grant them their premise. Let's say at 5 weeks, like right after a mom knows she's pregnant and gets an abortion. Can't feel pain, right? So not a person, right? Are you guys aware of a disease called congenital analgesia? Congenital analgesia. Want to know what's the problem with that disease? You can't feel pain, and lots of born people have it. So hey, pro-choicer, can we kill your uncle who has congenital analgesia? Because like the fetus that you say can't feel pain, therefore your uncle's not a person, right? And they go, oh, I don't really like that. Yes, exactly. Just like racists wouldn't like the fact that an albino would show up on their plantation and say, hey, racist slave owner, you said that skin color, that white skin, pale skin makes you more valuable than darker skin people. Well, you have darker skin than me. Did racists actually believe that albinos had greater rights? No, they don't like it when you apply their criteria for personhood in a way that screws them over. Then they're like, yeah, I don't really like my worldview anymore. Exactly. That's what we're trying to do with pro-choicers, guys. We're trying to say, hey, look, you say we can kill babies because they can't feel pain. What about born people who can't feel pain? And they go, oh gosh, I don't know what to do with that. Then maybe you should abandon your pro-abortion bigotry, right? It's called reductio ad absurdum, reduce your opponent's argument to absurdity. And then you should abandon your worldview. Okay, remember, level of development. This is the new woke criteria for personhood. They're not developed enough, so they're not self-aware. The baby doesn't know that they're like, they don't know that they're them. They're not self-aware enough to know that they're a unique individual. Right. Well, did you know the newest science has suggested that babies aren't self-aware until months after birth? So infants are not aware of themselves as a unique, distinct individual. Can we kill infants? Well, no one says yes except Peter Singer, right? So then why are you not applying your botched, bigoted criteria for personhood outside of the womb? Because then it might discriminate against them or their own babies who are born. Okay, level of development. What about environment? Well, you know, pro-lifer, you stupid conservative bigot, you see the baby's in the womb, and so it's her body, her choice, because it's in a womb. And so, like, we can't determine what she can or cannot do with her own body. Well, Democrats used to say, the party of slavery used to say that blacks were the property of plantation owners whose land they lived on. And today they say that babies are the property of their mothers whose bodies they live in. But where one is has no bearing on who one is, to quote Frank Beckwith. Your value stands apart from where you find yourself. So every pro-choicer isn't pro-choice for infanticide, right? Except almost every member of the Democratic Senate, by the way, who have vetoed the anti-infanticide bill from Ben Sass, Senator of Nebraska, like 20 times. But normal pro-choice Americans are not okay with killing babies after they're born, are they? And so if you ground the rights of the child in their location and they come outside of the womb, then what happened during that 6-inch journey through the birth canal? Oh, well, you guys don't know this? The fetus fairy flies up and sprinkles magical personhood conferring fairy dust on the child as they're born. And when that last toe leaves the vaginal canal, oh my gosh, it's a person. Obviously, this is ridiculous, right? The birth canal does not confer personhood. Your value doesn't come because you moved 6 inches from a uterus into the doctor's waiting hands. But that's what they say. They say the environment, the location of the womb means we can kill it. Well, obviously that doesn't hold up. And what's the last difference, the last criteria for personhood? Dependency, right? Degree of dependency. The baby's dependent on the mother. That's their favorite one, isn't it? They say that because the child needs the mother to survive in the womb, then ultimately it's the mother's choice to determine whether to consent to that dependency, right? Whether to consent to the child using their body. I get this on my Facebook all the time. People troll me, and they go, nobody has a right to use another person's body without their consent. Well, by the way, in nearly every abortion, a baby's killed who was created through a consensual act of sex by the mother. Very few abortions are performed in the case of rape. By the way, it's about 0.5%. According to the Guttmacher Institute, Planned Parenthood Statistical Research Branch. So I'm not quoting pro-life statistics. According to Planned Parenthood, about 0.5% to 1% of the annual abortions are performed in cases of rape. So in nearly every circumstance, the baby that's killed was created through a consensual act of sex. So when they say nobody has the right to use another person's body without their consent, I say, okay, well, the mother did give her consent to a child developing in her womb when she engaged in sex, which is biologically oriented towards procreation. Have you guys ever heard people say, consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy? Have you heard that one? And I say, consent to eating 100 donuts a day is not consent to getting fat. It's like, well, yes, it is, dude. If you eat 100 donuts a day, you will get fat. If you have sex, you will eventually get pregnant. Consent to one is consent to the other. Okay. But they say the mother can get the abortion and kill the baby because it's dependent on the mother. So it's the mother's right. Okay. If human value is only granted when you're not dependent on someone or something else, right? When you can survive on your own, then I guess we can kill born people who are dependent on caretakers, on heart pacemakers, on kidney machines, on insulin. Anyone here a diabetic or got a friend or family member that's a diabetic? Yeah, they're not a person. Sorry. I mean, if the pro-choicers being consistent, of course, I don't believe that, right? But they're dependent on something without which they cannot continue to live. And what about life support? Like the child in the womb, all of those people are dependent on someone or something else without which they cannot continue to live. So, hey, pro-choicer, can we kill those people? Raise their hands. Who can we kill? Can we kill your diabetic uncle? And they go, well, no, I don't like that. Well, then abandon your pro-abortion bigotry. Abandon your bigoted criteria for personhood, because that criteria can be turned right around to justify killing born people too. So in short, you guys, the argument for abortion cannot be confined to the womb. Any argument you use for the justification of killing preborn humans can also be used as a justification for killing born humans. And Abraham Lincoln, in his very trollish brilliance, Abraham Lincoln was really the first conservative troll before Ronald Reagan, but he was far more winsome and articulate, right? And he has this piece called Fragments on Slavery, Abe Lincoln, and we have the paper actually. It was this little piece of parchment where he wrote down the type of logic and reasoning that he ended up employing in his debates with Stephen Douglas. Have you guys heard of the Lincoln-Douglas debates? Very popular. So Stephen Douglas was the racist Democrat, the Democratic nominee who ran against Lincoln in 1859 for the 1860 election, right? And he ended up using this reasoning in his debates with Stephen Douglas. And so here's what Lincoln said. I want you guys to see this because I want you to understand abortion in a larger historical context, okay? Because it's the same worldview. And Lincoln pointed out the same thing I just pointed out about our opponent's arguments, that pro-choice arguments also justify abusing born people, while slavery arguments also justified abusing white people. Does that make sense? So here's what Lincoln said. Okay, I'll quote you verbatim. He said, okay, racist. I added that part. He said, you say A is white and B is black. Okay, it is color then. The lighter having the right to enslave the darker. Take care. By this rule, you were to be a slave to the first man you meet with a skin fairer than your own. Oops. Just like I made with the albino joke, right? You'd be enslaved to the albino. But then Lincoln says, oh, but you say it is a question of interest. And if you can make it your interest to enslave another, you have the right to do so. Take care by this rule. Take care by this rule. If he makes it his interest, he can enslave you, plantation owner. And then Lincoln says, oh, but you say it is a question of intellect, that whites are intellectually the superiors of blacks and therefore have the right to enslave them. Take care again. By this rule, you were to be a slave to the first man you meet with an intellect superior to your own. In other words, Lincoln was saying that racist arguments grounded personhood and rights, namely the natural rights like life and liberty. Racist arguments grounded natural rights, not in things we had in common, but in things that came in varying degrees. So if we all held up our palms this evening, right, we would all have varying shades of skin color, right? Skin color comes in varying degrees. Do we all have the same IQ? No, that would be pretty crazy if everyone here had the same exact IQ. So intellect comes in varying degrees. So guys, what happens when you ground natural rights in things we don't have in common and things that come in varying degrees? What follows? That rights come in varying degrees. Therefore, there's no such thing as human equality anymore. Pro-choice arguments do the same thing. They say rights are based on size, level of development, cognitive abilities, location, and your dependency. But some of us are more dependent than others, right? Some of us are larger than others. Some of us are more developed than others. So if you ground rights in those things, then there is no such thing as human equality. And those same pro choice arguments can justify killing the born pro choicer as well. So, is there any moral justification for abortion? Well, if there is, then there's also a moral justification for killing born people by using the same BS criteria checklist for personhood. So remember, premise two, abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being without proper justification. That's the premise they'll take issue with. Is the unborn human? Yes. Does abortion intentionally kill? Yes. Is abortion ever justified? Well, it's not justified medically and it's not justified morally. Because if we accept pro choice arguments, like Lincoln says, all we're doing is putting in place the premises that will justify our own mistreatment and enslavement. So when you look at one another and you look at each other, ask yourself the question, what's the only thing we have in common? We don't have gender in common. We don't have age, skin color, intellect, athleticism, artistic ability. We don't have any of these things in common. What's the only thing you guys, you and I have in common tonight? A human nature. We're human beings. And when did we become human beings? The moment of conception. So the only way to maintain this idea that we love in America called equality, human equality, the only way to maintain that system of equality is by grounding rights in the only thing we have in common, a human nature. And that also must include the preborn, who is a distinct, living, and whole human being from the moment of conception. So here's your 30-second soundbite to summarize the pro-life case. Pro-life advocates argue, according to the science of embryology, that from the moment of conception, you were a distinct, living, and whole human being. Philosophically, we argue that there is no value giving difference between you, the unborn human, and you, the born human, that makes it okay to kill you, the unborn human. And the only differences are size, level of development, environment, and dependency. And those are not good reasons for saying that you had no right to life in the womb. Oh, but you do now because you're born and the fetus fairy sprinkled her magical personhood conferring fairy dust on you. So there you go. There's the pro-life case, you guys. There's the pro-life syllogism. That's how you become a ninja for the pro-life movement and an ambassador for the preborn. And to dive deeper into all these ideas, you guys can subscribe to my podcast, Unaborted with Seth Gruber. I do 2 episodes a week, 1 interview a week, 1 with just me going through the ideas behind everything that's happening in the country, so that we can follow Peter's example or Paul rather, or Peter, by always being prepared to give a defense to everyone who asks us for the hope that we have. And if we should be able to do that for the gospel, we should also be able to do that for how the gospel gives us worldview lenses to make sense of everything else. And none of those issues is quite as important as the right to life. Thanks, guys.
That's really awesome, man. That's a powerful case. Thank you so much for that, Seth. All right, now if you have any questions about anything, you can drop those in the chat. We have a few minutes that we can go over any questions. So we're waiting in case you have some. I have some that got sent in. How can we answer in an emotionally sensitive way while not compromising on the truth to those who know or who were raped to become pregnant? So I guess how can we answer in an emotionally productive way to those who might have a pregnancy, but there's like a ton of emotion attached?
Yeah. And did you mention like in rape in the circumstance? Or yeah. So firstly, we as Christians should be the ones illustrating the most compassion and concern and love for the woman who's been raped. And here's why that's true. Here's why that we are actually the more compassionate one, guys. Generally, pro-lifers and Christians support harsher legal penalties against rapists than the pro-choicer does. So when the pro-choicer tries to use the rape example, guys, and which is real and horrific, they try to use that to do what? To make you look like the moral monster, right? How does it go? How's the argument go? Are you telling me, you sick pro-lifer, that if a woman's raped with and then has bearing that rapist child, you're gonna force her to carry that pregnancy to term? What if the baby looks like the rapist? And then that mother will be reminded every day she looks at the child of the rape she had to endure. wow, you're pretty sick, pro-lifer. I mean, right, that's how they make the argument. It's to make us look like moral monsters. Well, firstly, we're not forcing her to keep that, to have a baby. The rapist did that when he impregnated her. We're just saying that you can't kill children for the crimes of their father. And that's a great line, by the way. We should not be killing children for the crimes of their father. And that's what they're saying. The child's innocent, but you're saying because it was conceived in um, unfortunate and horrific means, that therefore killing it is justified. So one way to show that we're actually more compassionate is to say, actually, I care so much about justice for that woman that I would like to see life prison sentences and maybe castrations for the rapists. How do you feel about that, pro-choicer? Well, if you guys know anything about the pro-choice movement, you'll know that one of the things they want to abolish is the death penalty, and they're always trying to spring criminals from the clink. Then they always want shorter prison sentences. And many of these guys go on to then rape people again or murder people again. Okay, again, just we talked about just war before. Now we're talking about death penalty. We don't have time to dive into all these ideas. I am pro death penalty, and if you have more questions about that, I'll tell you why that does in no way discredits the pro life position. Very different, completely different. When people say, "Oh, you're pro life," oh, so you're also against the death penalty because you're pro life. What about their life? No, very different. And if you want me to talk to that, I'll jump into it. So I want to see these guys in prison for life. The pro choicer usually doesn't, and rapists never get the death penalty. They never do, unless they rape and murder a woman, maybe. But if you just rape a woman, you don't get the death penalty. So check out this. The pro-choicer says, give the death penalty to the baby who is just as innocent as their mother, but don't give the death penalty to the only guilty party, the rapist. If you believe that, your moral compass is broken, and I don't trust you on any other issue. So I want to see harsher legal penalties because I love women, because I want the rights of women respected, and I want rapists to suffer because that's just because of the horrific action that they perpetrated on a young or older woman. Okay, so that's one way we show compassion is wanting to see justice for these women. And you know how horrific it is for some of these women when these rapists get spring from the clink 4 or 5 years later. What kind of thoughts do you think are going through her head? That she might have to endure that again, that he comes back, that he rapes someone younger. Yeah, I don't think that woman got justice. I think he should never see the light of day again. And you can say that kindly, obviously, and say, listen, I want to see justice for these women. And I assume you do too, right, pro-choicers? So you support life prison sentences or castrations, and most of them will say no. So, and then it's the Christian community. I mean, we need to be rallying around the victims of any type of abuse and creating safe havens in our churches where the victims of abuse know that they won't be targeted, they won't be abused again, and they won't be taken advantage of because they're in a weak, traumatic, and vulnerable place. And if the church can't create that safe haven, right? Who can? So that's one good way to make that case. And then in terms of responding just with persuasiveness and winsomeness, you just want to, because some people are going to use rape in order as just a philosophical ramrod to try to destroy your position, and just keep going back to that main case, right? If the child is fully human, then and I held up two photos to you of a 16-week baby in the womb conceived by loving parents and a 16-week baby in the womb conceived in rape. Hey, pro-choicer, which one was conceived in rape? They can't tell you. And this should tune us into that self-evident reality that human beings are valuable, not because of the circumstances of their conception, but simply because they're human beings.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, here's another one. So you kind of talked about this a little bit. So he asks, are person and human exactly the same thing, or are there differences? I mean, are all human persons, or are human persons in becoming?
Yeah, great. So all humans are persons, but not all persons are humans. Okay. Angels would be an example of persons, but they're not humans, right? Um, God, the Father, is an example of a person, right? We're teaching our kid the catechism right now, right? And so one of the questions is, in how many persons does this one God exist, right? In three persons, right? So God and the Holy Spirit are persons, right? But are they humans? No, only Christ is human, right? Um, and then if there is extraterrestrial life, right? I'm not convinced there is, but if there is, um, they would be persons, right? If they're rational agents, but they wouldn't be humans. Do you see what I mean? So not all persons are humans, but all humans are persons. If you're a human, you're a person. Now, again, I don't even separate these terms really, except in the way I just did. If I'm talking about like angels or one of the members of the Trinity, because we have used those terms synonymously for a long time. It's only genocidal maniacs who have separated those terms. And just to drive this point home, historically, you guys, the Hiesgericht, or the German Supreme Court, literally says that the term person does not apply to the Jew. The Virginia Supreme Court, and then later the United States Supreme Court in the during slavery said that, yeah, that the term person, that the slave is not a person, right? And then in 1973, in Roe versus Wade, we said that the term person is used in the Constitution does not include the preborn, the unborn. So in each case, we've just stripped personhood from people that we know are human beings. And the arguments they use to justify the removal of personhood are criteria, litmus tests that would also can be used to dehumanize and discriminate against the elite class. So does that help? So all humans are persons, but not all persons are humans. And then you make that philosophical point that any argument used to remove personhood from the preborn could also be used to remove personhood from a whole set of born people that the pro-choicer would probably not like to see rounded up and slaughtered.
Awesome. Okay, next. In addition to being prepared to verbally answer the issue, are there things we as believers should be doing?
I mean, equip yourself to engage, right? Unless you've heard Scott Klusendorf or Lila Rose or Trent Bourne or Josh Brahm or other apologists for the pro-life movement, and you've taken a deep dive into pro-life apologetics, then you probably felt a little bit fire hosed tonight, and you're probably not going to remember everything I said. And that's why I make the podcast Unaborted with Seth Gruber. So check that out and just start listening on a regular basis. And in a few months, you'll be a pro-life ninja, flipping around, demolishing pro-abortion bigotry wherever you find it. The Case for Life by my boss, Scott Klusendorf, is one of the more accessible but robust book. So it's not like just cute pro-life stories. It's not that kind of pro-life book. It's like the most robust but accessible apologetics case for the pro-life position. Greg Kokel of Stand to Reason wrote a great one called Precious Unborn Human Persons years ago. It's very short. It's like booklet sized, and it's got some good nuggets in there. And then Randy Alcorn, a friend of mine, wrote a phenomenal book years ago called Pro-Life Answers to Pro-Choice Arguments. And it just has like one paragraph answers to like every argument you've ever heard and other ones that you haven't heard. So you just dive in and get equipped, right? But I would say my podcast is a little, of course, I'm tooting my own horn, but I would say it's a little more unique than even other pro-life podcasts, than even other podcasts just focused on abortion. Mine, I think, is far more unique in the breadth of what we cover. So check that out, and then just put everything into practice, right? Just like as Christians, if we only read our Bible and that's all we do, well, you're missing out on a lot first of the Christian life, right? Also, but you're also not learning how to live as a Christian, right? Same way, you need to apply the things you learn in arguments or in conversations with people. So if you have friends, family members, and coworkers that you can have respectful dialogue with who disagree with you, then go for it and start putting yourself out there.
Sick. So yeah, definitely after this, go check out Seth's podcast, Unaborted. Okay, we'll take two more. So what have you seen work to change people's minds most often?
Yeah, so the media has painted this picture where like America is cleanly divided between radical pro-abortion activists and like radical pro-life movement activists. It's just not an accurate depiction of reality. There are a lot of people in this country, guys, who are unsure. They're on the fence on this issue. They're really disgusted by late-term abortions, so they don't support the Democratic Party platform, which is abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason or no reason at all. Most Democrats don't even know that that's their party's platform. And when I tell them that and I show them that on the website, they're like, holy, oh gosh, third trimester abortions. So a lot of people in America, guys, are not like, well, I think any pro-choice position is extreme because they're still human beings, even if they're smaller. But when I use the word extreme, I mean there is something that seems more extreme about third trimester abortions, right? Most Americans don't support that. And so there are a lot of people whose minds are persuadable. They are persuadable. And they often have not encountered or dealt with our arguments before. which namely the ones I showed to you tonight, which is that any pro-choice argument can be used to justify killing the born as well. And so um, those people are out there. And if you're willing to, have the courage of your convictions to speak up and speak out, because by the way, the left does this all the time. They are loud and proud, aren't they? I mean, the left, which is essentially the rival religion of secular humanism and secular progressivism, is far more devoted and loud to their religious tenets than Christians are to theirs in America, and that's a damning critique on the church. Right? We say we're not political. We just preach the gospel. Well, there's nothing political about tearing the limbs off of children. Okay, and whereas the left, they treat abortion as a religious issue. And I have a sermon I gave on this at Calvary Chapel Chattanooga a couple weeks ago. It's on my podcast if you guys want to listen to it. And I explained how abortion is actually the greatest sacrament of the religion of secular progressivism. And if that sentence is like strange to you, go listen to it. I called it the religion, sacrament, and liturgy of Planned Parenthood. Because guys, the culture of death is an alternative religion. It's not just an alternative politics. And this is because eternity is written on the heart of man. And so we all have a God-shaped hole. So religion is the natural state of man, meaning the grasp for something higher, the grasp for eternal life, the grasp for peace, right? Where scripture says, he obtained peace through his blood shed on the cross. Well, the secular progressive movement also tries to obtain peace and eternal life, but they do it through the shedding of the blood of babies. So if you want to get a more spiritual warfare picture of the abortion wars, go listen to that podcast episode, because we need to see this with spiritual eyes. Anyways, I just say all of that to say that the left is far more devoted to their religious views on abortion than often the church has been to our religious views on abortion, which are objectively true, which is that the God man stepped into human history in a womb that he once knit together to redeem mankind from their sins. And why can't we be as passionate about making that case? And so speak up, speak out, and do it all the time. Be willing to be fired for your pro-life beliefs, because the left is for theirs. They don't care what we think about them. And they're willing to count the cost for their religious zeal for the culture of death. Why can't we be for for true and undefiled religion, right? Which is to care for orphans and widows in their distress. Well, if we're supposed to care for the orphan because their life is endangered because their parents are dead, how much more should we care for the orphan in the womb whose life is endangered because his parents want him dead? That child can still be saved, and they can still maintain their parents if they're saved. That is an orphan by any biblical definition, and it's about time we wake up and start making that case. And so, to that question, get bold, get out there, and start articulating your case for life and what you believe. And right, this is what you guys do, and why you believe it. And so, dive into the apologetics, dive into the books, dive into my podcast, so that you can stand confidently in your beliefs. And be able to actually start changing minds, changing hearts, and saving lives. The last thing I'll add is abortion imagery. Show everyone abortion imagery. Have a video on your phone of abortion imagery and photos, and ask your pro-choice friends, could I show you, would you be okay if I showed you what an abortion looks like, since you're pro-choice? And I thought you might want to see what you support. And then show them the mangled bodies of children after an abortion. And that disgusts a lot of people. Now, they're not humble enough to admit in that moment, oh my gosh, you're totally right, I repent, right? But what you're doing, like Greg Kokel says, you're putting a stone in their shoe, and eventually they're gonna hopefully abandon their position.
That's awesome. That's a great call to action, because we have something that we ought to stand for. And it's not just that, but we have so much to stand on as well. So that's
Right.
great. Okay, so there's one more quick question that got shot in there. I feel like it's just a clarification, so we'll just squeeze it in there. So would you say that abortion is murder, since it is intentional and not the same thing as just killing?
Right. So yeah, I say that a lot. I say abortion is murder. I mean, technically it's not, but it's just silly terms, right? It's just silly linguistics. So murder, technically speaking, is um intentionally killing people who have their natural rights protected in law. And so what does the pro abort say? They say, well, the courts have said that abortion is a right, right? The courts have said the preborn child doesn't have a right to life. And so abortion's not murder because abortion's legal, and we don't legalize murder. You see what I mean? So it just becomes a linguistic game. So it's kind of just a silly game that I refuse to participate in. So yeah, say that. Say abortion is murder. It obviously is, because our rights don't come from the courts, do they? Our rights come from God, and that was the premises that built this republic. We're the only republic, democracy, if you want to use that word, but we're not pure democracy. We're a republic. We're the only country in human history that has said, hey, rights come from God, and so governments are instituted among men to recognize and protect those rights. We're so accustomed to our liberties here that we forget that how revolutionary of an idea that is. That's wild. Unfortunately, um, courts can choose to ignore those rights. And that's why our system was set up the way that it was, representative government and not pure democracy, in order to create gridlock and slow things down. And so, unless the church starts participating in that public square and in that political battle, then we're never going to succeed in restoring that first and most important of all rights to the preborn child, the right to life, the right without which no other rights make any sense. So yeah, it's murder because you're intentionally killing an innocent human being. And then it just becomes, well, it's legal, so it's not murder. Right. That's my point, is it should be illegal. It should not be legal, just like slavery should not have been legal. So anyways, I don't know if that helps. Don't get caught up in the linguistic games they'll try to play with you. It's feticide, it's infanticide, it's baby killing, it's human killing. They just happen to be smaller humans, but they're still image bearers of God.
Awesome. Okay, so last question. This is kind of like to wrap it all up. So what would you say to someone who's considering to have an abortion or is planning to have an abortion? Kind of what exactly would you say to them if you only have a short amount of time? And then what
Right.
would be your final advice?
Yeah, well, this is why it's really great to learn the science of embryology and prenatal development, to know what's happening in the womb at very specific stages of development, because it's wild, guys. So the heart starts beating at 21 days. I don't know if you knew this. 21 days, the baby's heart starts beating. Okay, when do most women know they're pregnant? About 4 weeks. 3 to 4 weeks would be the earliest, right? Because they date from the last menstrual cycle, right? And so by the time a woman, she's, oh, I missed my period. Yeah, your baby's 3 to 4 weeks old. And so guess what? Every abortion kills a baby with a human beating heart. So if you know these things, you can fascinate mothers. Yes, because you're a mother when you're pregnant. You can fascinate mothers with the beauty of the life already inside them. And so I would say, Mom, did you know your baby's heart's already beating? And did you know that their skin is so translucent that you can see the heart beating through their skin? Your child is already developing. Their brain waves will be detectable within weeks. Their heart is already pumping blood. That child is very human, and within a few weeks will be able to feel the pain of dismemberment by the time you get that abortion scheduled. Listen, our church will adopt your baby. We will pay for any fees you need. We will care for you and that child, please, whatever you need to choose life. Now, that doesn't mean that a financial struggle is a justification for abortion. It obviously isn't. But why wouldn't we as the church remove any silly excuses she's using? Even though they're silly, they still are excuses that she's using for the abortion, right? Why wouldn't we remove those and say, no, you can't use that as an excuse and justification for abortion, because guess what? We just took it away from you. We'll raise the baby. We'll pay for the delivery fee, right? We'll get you housing. We'll get you diapers for 2 years. We'll throw you a baby shower. And this is why I'm an ambassador for the organization called Love Life. Love Life started and is out in Charlotte, North Carolina. And their goal is to put a Christian witness outside every abortion clinic in the country every day, offering the hope of the gospel and the help of the local church that would result in an end to abortion and the orphan crisis. And so we've seen through 40 Days for Life, guys, that when Christians are outside sidewalk counseling and praying outside of abortion clinics every day, there's an upwards of a 70% no-show for abortion appointments. And we know that, guys, because some people who used to work in the abortion clinics, they become part of the pro-life movement. And they tell the pro-lifers that. The former abortion workers say, hey, you Christians, now that I'm pro-life and Christian, hey, when you guys were doing your daily prayer sessions and sidewalk counseling, we would see upwards of 75% no-shows, canceled appointments for killing babies. And so when the church shows up where God already is, outside of centers that kill children, everything changes. Because for whatever strange reason, you guys, God doesn't just snap his fingers and end abortion. I guess he doesn't. He's not, I guess he chooses not to. So he waits to use his bride as the church as the most powerful organism in human history for change. Why wouldn't we show up outside of, by the way, the only places where we know innocent human beings are scheduled to die? And so, what do you say to a woman? You tell her that you will give her everything she needs. You'll get her out of a dangerous relationship. You'll relocate her if she has a degenerate boyfriend who's violent. You'll pay for all of the fees and you'll help raise that baby. And the church has those funds, you guys, especially when we stand together, united, we have those funds. And so Love Life creates church partners through Love Life missionaries all around the country. So when a woman chooses life, you've got the financial, emotional, and familial backing of dozens, if not hundreds of churches in a given county who will underwrite and cover everything she needs to choose life. And why wouldn't we do that as the church? Oh, it's almost like the Good Samaritan in the parable of the Good Samaritan who saw a bleeding victim on the side of the road who was almost dead. And he sacrificed his time because he was busy, his energy because he put the bleeding victim on his own donkey, and his money. You remember, he takes him to the inn, he nurses him back to health. And what does he tell the innkeeper? I have to go now. When I come back, I'm going to pay you for any other costs that accumulated in caring for this bleeding victim while I was gone. At the very least, we as the church have the same responsibility to bleeding unborn neighbors as the Good Samaritan did to the bleeding neighbor on that road that day, which is to sacrifice our time, our energy, and our money to save unborn children. And the unborn is the only class of neighbors that it is legal to kill today in America. So that means that it requires more of us on that issue than other issues because it denies the right to life, the only right from which all of our other rights flow. So, and your church should start a Love Life chapter. Your church should come book me to speak. I'll pour kerosene onto their souls and light a fire and then give you guys a game plan on what to do. Sometimes churches go, we're waking up to the pro-life issue. We feel like we need to do something, but we don't know what to do. It's already done for you. Don't reinvent the wheel. Love Life raises up sidewalk counselors, mentor families, post-abortion healing counseling for people who have had abortions, and orphan foster care. So the church is ending the orphan foster care crisis, the abortion crisis, and those wounded by abortion. We've already done it. We have training for you. We have Zoom training. We have in-person training. We're raising up missionaries. Just let us come train you and let us raise up leaders in your church. It's already done. Here's your game plan. Go. And so you guys can go to lovelife.org/America, lovelife.org/America. I'm basically an apologist ambassador for Love Life. And so I spoke in more churches in the last 6 months than the previous 6 years of my career. So I think Aslan's on the move, and I think he's bidding his church to wake up and get involved. And I think pastors are starting to wake up to the pro-life issue in a way that I've never seen before in my life. I'm 29 years old. I'm just shy of 30. I've been speaking publicly on this issue since I was 18, and I've never seen the church and pastors this awake before and starting to wake up. And so, so we are starting that at Calvary Chapel Chino Hills with Pastor Jack Hibbs. That's blowing up right now. We'll probably shut down the Pomona Planned Parenthood in a year or less because we've got so many Christians out there every day saving babies, and then mothers are coming to Christ, and then we're discipling them in the church. And so why wouldn't the church do that? So that's the answer. Tell these families and women that you'll give them anything and everything they need, and you'll freaking raise that baby and adopt it if they're not going to bear that child. And then you just preach to them the beauty of that life inside them, because most people don't know the development of the human being that's happening in their womb or have never seen the imagery of what that human looks like. So there you go.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like that's a great point, because something that'll commonly be said is, oh, you're just a word. You're just telling me this stuff. You're not going to do anything about it. But no, we should contribute. So
That's right.
That's awesome. Okay, so just before we let you go, where can they find you? So where can they find you as a resource?
Yeah, so shameless plug, go subscribe to Unaborted with Seth Gruber. Leave me a rating and review. It helps us reach more people. We got like almost 530 something ratings, which is pretty fat for a pro-life podcast. It's such a narrow lane of an issue. So what that does is, it climbs us up the rating ladder. And so then people see my show up on other related types of content that they watch. So we've had people reaching in who are like got involved in pro-life ministries at their church because they listen to the podcast, and we're just trying to wake people up. So leave me a rating and review. It really helps me. You can go to sethgruber.com if you want to book me for an event, sethgruber.com. And then I try to crank out a lot of really helpful content through the guests on my show, through the twice a week podcast, and through speaking events. And so you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook. I'm a little less active on Twitter, but pretty active on Facebook and Instagram. And then just share that with people. and tune into the show, and I think you'll get woke to the pro-life issue, and get the tools you need to engage. So I'm on all the, essentially all the major platforms. You can engage with me there. But I'm a podcaster and stuff, but I'm mainly a speaker. I mean, I'm doing like 3 events a month would be a slow month. Sometimes I'm doing like 5 to 10 speaking events a month. And so I speak in youth groups, faith-based high schools, churches from the pulpit on Sunday mornings, pregnancy resource center banquets, conferences, and college campuses. So I partner with pro-life clubs or conservative clubs. And I have very edgy, fun titles that are intended for a hostile audience. It's like I'm assuming I'm speaking at UC Berkeley, right, or whatever. And then we do Q&A and everything. So any kind of venue you want to bring me in to speak at, and then I have a church partner that's partnered with me. So youth groups or churches who don't have the budget, or Christian schools who don't have the budget to fly out a guest speaker or to pay his honorarium and all this stuff. If for people like that, I have a church partner who will underwrite all my expenses. But it's only for those who don't have the money and the budget for guest speakers. If a church or youth group has the budget, then man up, right? But and I don't charge very much because that's not why I'm in it. But if you have connections with people who would like, oh, we'd love to have Seth, but we don't have the money. This is how much that my church partner cares about getting me to reach more people, is they'll underwrite all the costs. So that opportunity is available to you guys as well to wake up more people and get them involved. So there you go.
Very cool. So Seth Gruber, everyone, make sure to go check him out. All right. Well, thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you
Keep it
so
up.
much.
Yeah, you guys are the future of the country, the posterity of the country, man. Got to wake up the church now, or it's going to be too late. So appreciate you guys. Keep up the good work.